Welcome to Real Battles, Real People. I'm your host, Christian Betancourt, and I have Cam Knight here. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Christian, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Please introduce yourself.
All right, so my name's Cam Knight. I'm a mentor, international speaker, and author of a dozen books in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And do you want me to just dive into the topic I talk about? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, for as far back as I can remember, I've been a fairly driven individual. Kind of hard not to be living in a culture and society where there's just so much personal development content, and everyone is telling you to do more and be your best self, as well as reach for the stars. So I've always wanted to do more and have more in life, but I always felt like I missed the mark or the success was much more difficult than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. Now, at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers that I came across was you need to have better beliefs or you need to have motivation. And yes, those things are part of the equation, but I always felt like there was more to it. And every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And the more books I read, the more coaching I did, and the more seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the brain. And a lot of the communication I was receiving was, oh, this is what's going to hold you back, or this is why we can't do certain things, and things of that nature. So over time, my brain started to come to the realization that, wait a minute, there's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. There's actually a part of our brain built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's a brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
Can resistance actually be a form of protection?
More or less, it is a form of protection. So it's the part of the brain deciding to see if what we want to do or the desire that we have, if we have the time, energy, and resources to do it, and in many ways, if it's safe to do it. But the challenge is that our resistance can go overboard and actually hinder ourselves in a lot of ways and can almost have an opposite effect of protection because it keeps us from doing the things that can be helpful and even good for us.
So before you were talking about the tricks of resistance, with those distractions like addiction, illness, are are those similar patterns in your work?
Yeah, so one of the concepts I talk about with resistance is, like you said, tricks of resistance. And to understand the tricks of resistance, it helps to understand that when the brain or when resistance holds us back, it doesn't tell us that it's holding us back. It doesn't say things like, hey, Christian, you know that thing that you're trying to do? Well, it goes against our habits, so I can't let you do it. Or that goal of yours, well, it goes against our identity, so we're just going to sit here and do nothing. Nope, resistance manifests other ways. And our brain will use a lot of tricks to keep us from moving forward or doing the things that we want. And it's really important to understand these tricks because these tricks are very sneaky and sly. They're so sneaky and sly that we wouldn't think of them as tricks, which is why they work so well and why we fall for them so easily. And some of the tricks are more commonly known in things that we know. So when we fall into things like distractions or social media and television and other avoidance behavior, in many ways it is a trick that the brain is using to keep us from doing the thing that we really want or the task, activity, or goal that's going to move the needle forward in our life. But these tricks they go beyond that. They're pretty sly. And, you know, we have so many tricks And instead of going into all of them, I can describe how one of these tricks can manifest for someone. Would you like me to kind of go into that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, one of the tricks is that the brain will start throwing up excuses. And I have a really great story to share about this. And that I knew someone who really knew how to mess up his life. Anytime somebody would give him an advice or suggestion, he would throw up all sorts of excuses of how it couldn't work, or wouldn't work for him. And he went out and paid good money to hire coaches and experts. And anytime they would give him advice, he would come up with excuses like, I don't have time, I don't have energy, or I don't have this or that. And what's interesting is that he would go to great lengths to come up with the excuses like, I don't want to support that, this goes against my beliefs, and people who are like that are so and so. And what's really interesting is that he really wasn't making up the excuses. It was the part of the brain that creates resistance. And because he thought those excuses were in his head, he thought he was thinking them. And because he was thinking them, he thought they were true. And because he thought they were true, he followed them and thought those excuses were real. And so, this is one of the sneaky ways the brain uses tricks. It'll throw up excuses into our head, and because we think the excuses are in our head, we're thinking them. And because we think we're thinking them, we think they're valid. So it's a perfect way that resistance stops us. And what's really interesting is our brain will go to great lengths to make up these excuses, saying things like, this is not in line with my beliefs, and things of that nature. And almost always that's not true, or it's almost BS, because for the things we have little resistance about, those excuses don't come up. But the things the brain does want to hold us back from, those excuses will come up. And again, like I said, because we think it's our own voice, we end up following it. So this is just one example, but there are other examples too. Like oftentimes when we want to do something, our brain will create feelings of overwhelm. It'll make the task, activity, or goal so much bigger than it really is that just thinking about it, we get exhausted. So I know for a fact that all of us have experienced moments where we were resisting doing something, thinking it was going to be much harder than it really was. But once we started, we realized it wasn't as difficult as we thought. And we wondered, why didn't we start sooner? Well, the reason we didn't is because the brain made it seem so big, we were avoiding it and thinking it was going to be much more difficult when it really wasn't. So, this is another trick that kind of plays out. So, the brain has all sorts of tricks up its sleeves to keep us from doing things. And as I mentioned, these tricks can be pretty sneaky, and they're so sneaky we don't think of them as tricks, which is why we often fall for them, and resistance wins in keeping us moving forward.
Yeah. What do you think that resistance often disguises itself like so sneaky and instead of showing up openly?
Because if it showed up openly, then we would probably counteract it. But because it shows up sneakily, then it can achieve what it is trying to achieve. And to really understand what's happening with these tricks is we've all heard about the fight and flight response, right? It's a response animals have done to single-celled organisms. And this response either prepares us for a task or activity or has us run away. Now, as we humans have evolved, so has our flight response. So nowadays, living in a culture and society where pretty much all land is owned by someone, we can't run away to someone's house. We can't flee to someone's land. And even if we did, we can't live off of their land or their house. So when our brain wants to make us run away from something, it has us run away in other ways. And in a lot of ways, procrastination and sabotage is our brain and resistance way of making us run away from a task, activity, and goal. And because, we humans have evolved so much, the way the brain makes us run away has evolved too. And again, it could be with things like social media, television, even drinking and alcohol are a form of running away. But then it can be more sneaky, like some of the tricks that I've discussed.
Yeah. Especially in this generation, maybe a couple years before, it was getting really bad with social media,
Yeah.
on the phone all the time. And back then in the 80s, 90s, there was no such thing as a phone until it came out later on.
No.
And it was more like, you know, the connection between human beings, and now it's totally different now.
Yeah.
How do you think we could get back to that?
Honestly, I think about that a lot, and I don't know if there is an easy solution because things like social media and YouTube, as well as the internet, reading internet articles, they generate so much money, and it's really important for our, economic development that in some ways a lot of people don't want us to stop because if we stop, then a lot of these systems that make a lot of money and where a lot of people earn their livelihood from will kind of stop. And I don't know if people want to give up that. So I think we have to ask the bigger questions. The other way is to really understand the damaging effects of media that's having. I mean, there's so many effects that media has. One of them is just the amount of content that's on there. A lot of the content is a lot of violence. It's very sexualized, and so it's not really good for us. But what's more important is that a lot of this content is creating a false expectation of what life is supposed to be like or how relationships are supposed to go. Even in a lot of the personal development, there's not a lot of good information, but there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of like motivation and inspiration, and those things are good. But if we don't understand resistance, we can have all the motivation in the world, but then we'll hit up against this brick wall anytime we want to do it and not move forward. And that ends up creating feelings of burnout, overwhelm, as well as feelings like there's something wrong with me because I can't do this thing that I was motivated to do. But even more dangerous is nowadays the stuff on our screens, they change so quickly. The scenes change much more rapidly. Meaning, when we look at TV shows and movies from the 50s and 60s, the scene would change maybe every 3 to 4 seconds or longer. But now things are switching on the screens so much quicker in less than under a second. And there's even more activity there, such as tickers, banners, pattern interrupts. And it's training our brain to hold attention for shorter and shorter periods. So I think people can learn really what's happening when they're going on social media. One, that they're being exposed to a lot more violence and sexualized content. Two, a lot of the information is creating false expectations where we think social media is helping us, but in reality, it's kind of changing what we should be expecting from the world. And when the world doesn't meet it that way, we feel down. And more importantly, understanding just how much these screen changes are really rewiring the brain to hold attention for shorter and shorter periods. Hopefully, that can be enough for people to kind of start shifting away from it. But again, I don't know if that will be enough because it's such a big revenue driver for so many companies and industries that, in a way, like we're almost being encouraged to be on it more and more.
Yeah.
I know it was a long-winded answer, but like I said, it's something I think about a lot. So hopefully, yeah,
And kind of pulls us in into the technology, uh, cell phone, instead
yeah,
of actually talking to someone face to face. Now everything else is on social media. Uh,
yeah. I think there are some things that we can do to limit our need and our like being drawn to media. For example, I like to keep my cell phone on grayscale, so there's no colors. So every time I have the phone on, like I don't have this like all these bright colors that are stimulating me, which makes me want to constantly be stimulated and open my phone for it. So I have it on grayscale. I Because I'm running a business, I do need to be on social media. So I don't go on social media unless I'm posting business related content. But if someone is not running a business or needs to do social media for that, they can just uninstall their apps. Another thing I recently started doing, which has been huge in keeping me from being on screen so long, is I turned everything into dark mode. So instead of having these bright colors on my screen, everything is dark. And the text that I see and the websites, that I will scroll through, it's white text on a dark background. So I'm not getting as much blue light and other of the damaging effects. So I think it's still possible for us to engage with our phones and electronics, but in more healthier ways.
Sometimes, you have to find an outlet to relax yourself, going to the gym, doing yoga, doing meditation. Uh,
Yeah. So this is a really important point. As humans, we like to think of ourselves as these conscious, walking, talking beings. But what we forget is that there's all these internal processes going on underneath to be able to do what we can do. So we have thoughts running, we have emotions cycling, we also have physical sensations and all sorts of stuff. And when we are doing things or moving about the world, these do get triggered and riled up. And so we do need a release. And more or less, no matter what we're doing, whether we're going to work, having a difficult conversation, or even, meeting friends for lunch, all of that stuff are triggering things inside of us that do require for us to kind of release it. And a lot of people are now using destructive distractions to do it. So, like the things that we mentioned, television, social media, YouTube, and maybe even drugs and alcohol. But if we can find things that can be helpful, that are more healthy, like you mentioned, exercise, I think meditation's a really good one. I definitely think breath work is really good. I do a lot of breath work. And I think one of the best things a person can do really is to get out into nature more because nature has molecules that are very nourishing to our body. And just getting out in nature, although it's not a strenuous activity like exercise, can provide a lot of release that, for all the interactivity that we're building throughout the day and the week.
out of all the books that you've written, how many books did you do?
I've written a dozen books now, so 12
Dozen.
books. Yeah.
12 books. Wow, what an accomplishment.
Yeah. And I will say this was all pre ChatGPT. So when it was actually hard to write a book and took months and years to write, nowadays people are using ChatGPT where they're pumping out books much quicker. So all my books were prior to that.
Okay. Was there a time where there was one book that was challenging to you that you felt like there was like some type of resistance showing up in your progress?
Um, I think yeah, there was one book It was really two books. So if you see my concentration book and the speed reading book. So this is really interesting, and this is a really good example of tricks of resistance. I took on the ambitious goal to write two books at the same time. I don't know why I did, but I felt called to write a book on reading as well as concentration. And I thought it would take me a few months to write the two books. But both of those projects became much bigger and more grand than I had anticipated. They ended up actually taking me 2 years to finish both of those books. And and I was working literally night and day to write the two books. And what's really interesting about the resistance that I was encountering is because I told myself I would start marketing myself more once I finished those books. But there was some resistance inside of me that didn't want to put myself out into the world, that wanted to avoid marketing. And so the trick that showed up is it made the projects much bigger than they needed to be. And the reason that's a trick is because it was so big and overwhelming, and because it took so much more time to complete, all that time I spent writing was time I couldn't go out and market. So this is a very important concept for people to understand is sometimes when we set out to do a particular task, activity, or goal, we sometimes will be like, we want to make it grand, we want to make it big, we want to make it bigger than anything that's ever been done before, or make it so good that everyone will love it. But as soon as we make it big, it means we have to put a lot of time into it. And because we have to put a lot of time into it, it prevents us or takes time away from other things we should be doing. But what's more is for some people, a lot of times when they do make something bigger than it needs to be, they get so exhausted by it that they don't end up finishing it. And so it's another way the tricks of resistance show up is by making us so drained by working on something that doesn't need to be as big as it is that we don't finish it. And so resistance ends up winning.
Has there been a moment where you maintained awareness with resistance, avoiding it to sneak in when you're doing your business or any type of fatigue or distractions?
Yeah, I mean, what I say is the tricks of resistance are extremely sly. And as I mentioned, they have all sorts of tricks up its sleeve. And most anything that is keeping me from doing what I want, I assume is a trick of resistance. I will even go as far as to say when we get sick or when we get into an accident, it's likely some trick playing out. Because when we're sick, we don't have the energy to do anything. And because we can't do anything, we can't make progress on our goal. Or if we get into an accident, that accident creates chaos and it takes our time and attention away from our work to be able to handle that chaos. And so that's time and attention away that is keeping us from moving forward in what we're trying to do. So I'm always aware and on the lookout for these tricks. And anything that is kind of holding me back or not helping me create the progress that I want, I just assume it's probably some trick that my brain is playing. And then if there's a trick, it means I'm in resistance. And if there's resistance, I kind of look at what is going on internally for me that is wanting me to slow my progress or wanting to create unnecessary hurdles in my life.
For someone that is listening in right now, what if they feel stuck or lost or they're in a dark place, how can they determine if resistance is holding them back versus like a genuine limitation?
If they're lost and they're in a dark place, it's likely resistance holding them back. And even if it was a limitation, that is resistance. That's the brain going, oh, I don't believe this can work. I don't believe this is possible, or I don't believe I'm good enough for it. And so those are the limitations that resistance looks at to see if we should do something. And like I said, more motivation and inspiration isn't the answer. I know there's a lot of motivation and inspirational content out there where it gives people this, huge dopamine or rush of these positive good feelings. And I believe the reason there's so much of it is because it makes people feel so good. They hit that like and comment, and it feeds the algorithm. And because people think because people are responding to that, more people are creating that content. But unfortunately, motivation and inspiration, unfortunately, doesn't actually lead to action. Because once we get motivated to do something, the brain will look at that desire and see if we should do it. And it goes through a whole host of criteria to see if we should be able to do it or if it will allow us to do it. And it'll look at things like our limiting beliefs, our habits, our comfort zones, our self image and identity. It'll look at our authority issues. It looks at a whole host of criteria. And I guess, long story short, it really helps that somebody, when they are in a dark space, not so much run to motivation, inspiration, but to really look deep down inside them and see what's causing that resistance. What is it that is causing the brain to want them to stay in that dark space or stay in that space where, things are moving the way they'd like? So that's one part of it. The other part is using things that can rewire our brain to move us forward. And there's a lot of stuff out there. You talked about meditation, I brought up breath work, and there's things like affirmations and visualizations. All those things are really helpful because they help rewire our mind to naturally create the actions that we want or the outcomes that we want to attract. Now, I think one of the simplest ways to do that is with self talk. For those who don't know, self talks are statements that you repeat to yourself of the changes that you want to have or have happen. And if a person can repeat the change that they would like with words, they're more likely to go after that. And I have created a set of statements that I find that most people resonate with because it hits on the core things that we're all seeking. And what I found, being an author for 15 years and coaching hundreds of people, is at the root of what we're all looking for is we're wanting to do more. We're wanting to do more to make more money. We're wanting to do more to get others to like us. We're wanting to do more to improve our health. And more importantly, we're actually wanting to do more to get to like ourselves, to get ourselves to feel self acceptance. And I created a statement. It's called I'm a do it now person. I easily do things now. I easily accomplish my goals right away. If a person can repeat this statement on a regular basis, it'll start going into their mind, rewiring their brain to do more things. And I'm going to break down the psychology of this statement so people can understand why it's so important. So, I'm a do it now person creates an identity or self image of being someone who does things now. So, when a desire or motivation comes up, that desire gets filtered by resistance, and resistance says, oh, I'm a do it now person. So, it's more likely to allow us to do it. The second part of the statement, I easily do things now, is to make the things that we're doing more easy. Because a lot of times when we do stuff, it's kind of annoying and frustrating and painful. But if we start affirming, I easily do things now, it makes those things a lot more enjoyable. And the last part of the statement is, I easily accomplish my goals right away. And that's really important because it's easy to do a lot of things, but just spin ourselves in circles. And so that last part of the statement helps us create our actions towards a specific goal or destination. So I'm going to summarize. If a person can repeat, I'm a do it now person, I easily do things now, I easily accomplish my goals right away on a regular basis, like repeat it in the morning, in the evening, when they're in the shower, when they're cooking, cleaning, whatever, the more they'll just start to do more things. And those things that they do will be more related to a goal that they're going after.
Awesome guests like yourself, to share this to the world where people are lost, people are in pain,
Yeah.
people, my audience is gonna listen to you. And how can someone reach out to you as a life coach?
So they can reach out to me at camknight.com. That's KAMKNIGHT.com. I've got a free gift for them. It's called 5 Ways to End Procrastination and Sabotage. And if they want to work with me, they can email me at mentor@camknight.com. So mentor at camknight.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So as we close out, what is something that you would want to share to our audience today?
Yeah. So what I like to kind of close out when I do speaking like this is to remind people that wanting doesn't equate to having. Just because they want something doesn't mean they'll take the necessary steps to be able to go after it. And that's because all of our wants get filtered by resistance. And if it doesn't give us the green light, it'll be difficult to do that thing. And so it's really important that people are careful about the wants that they choose. And more importantly, to know that there's going to be hurdles and challenges that are going to come, and they're actually going to come from ourselves. And the resistance is so sneaky, it'll make it seem like the challenges are external. It'll make it seem like it's because of the people, it's because of our circumstances, it's because of our way of life. But that's just the tricks of resistance trying to stop us. And if a person can be prepared to be stopped and understand how the tricks are going to come, they are more likely to be able to weep through the resistance to be able to achieve what they're seeking. So that's one thing I want to leave with people. And I want to also kind of talk about this quote that we've all heard. It's called, or it goes more or less like, you are your own worst enemy. Well, resistance is that enemy that stops us. So it probably gives people more perspective into why, they say we are our own worst enemy, or helps people understand how we can be our own worst enemy. And if we know that there is a part of us that it's kind of like an enemy to our own progress, then we're in a better position to, what's the word, to be prepared for anything that this enemy can do to hold us back.
Well, thank you, sir, so much for being on my show. Um, it was an honor to have you here and to share your knowledge to everybody, all the audience here. Thank you so much. And this is real battles, real people. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Christian. This was fantastic.